Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Chris Rogers, an educator, speaker, worship leader, and a recovery coach whose work focuses on helping young people navigate one of the most complicated realities of modern life, which is growing up online. In an age shaped by AI, endless stimulations, algorithm-driven content, and blurred lines between truth and manipulation, Chris works at the intersection of mental health, self-awareness, digital safety, and compulsive online behavior. Through his work with Rebooted Teen, Chris helps parents and young people develop healthier conversations, stronger self-awareness, and practical tools for recovery and resilience in the digital age. Today's conversation is about mental health, internet culture, overstimulation, self-advocacy, healing, accountability, and what it means to grow up human in a world engineered by constantly capturing your attention. Chris, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
That was a great introduction. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for having
Right, it was great and it was long too. Oh, mine. Yes, so take us back to your early years, right? So before you became an educator and recovery coach, what first made you interested in, helping young people navigate difficult internal struggles?
me. Well, I remember vividly being 14 years old, not knowing really where to turn or who I could trust when it comes to the
Mhm.
way my body was changing, especially when it came to my relationship with the internet. Most of the things that I talk about, with my clients are about something that is not always the most comfortable thing to talk about, and that is the world of pornography. And
Mhm.
to make a long story short, that's something that I was involved with for a long time. It really dominated my decision making, and especially when I was young, when it's expected to have, certain types of thinking change and the way my body responds to the world changing. But again, I also know what it's like to feel like I was ashamed of the way I was feeling. I didn't feel safe to confide in anybody, and there seemed to be nobody who could understand. And especially, like you said in your introduction, we're talking about a generation that does not know what life is like before social media. We're talking about a generation who spent a significant portion of time behind a screen in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. We're talking about a generation really unlike any other. To go through both adolescence and the boom of social media at the same time, we're talking about a generation with expectations beyond anything I've experienced in my younger years for sure. My goal in my heart is to build a system and community that meets a young person exactly where they are and be that person that I know a young person could aspire to be. Not because I'm so great, it's only because I've been in their shoes. You know what I mean? To be that big brother, if you will, to be that father figure if they need, just in a sense of I'm going to share with you in a shame-free way what's going on with your body, what to expect, but ultimately what you can do about it. So that way, any compulsive behaviors they don't have to run you, and we can work toward through using tools, through leaning on community and receiving accountability to become the type of person that you actually want to be. So we can talk more about that, but that's why this is very important to me. I got into this because I know how big the need is for young people today to know that they can trust somebody. And
Right.
I know how important it is for families to feel equipped to have these open, shame-free conversations. Because unfortunately, a lot of the way that perhaps, we were raised, any conversations that had to do with the internet or sexuality, what have you, maybe it was downplayed or shamed or just not talked about at all. Kind of swept under the rug, like, oh, we don't talk about this. It's sort of like the monster that lives in your closet. It's sort of like we don't talk about it, just kind of keep it stashed away in there. But the more we keep stuff a secret, the more the stigma will sort of persist, right? So we're trying to break that stigma, not by force, but through conversation and compassion. So that's why I got into this.
Wow. All right. Okay. So, Chris, I think you're doing amazing, honestly, because
Thank you.
our generation today, this is exactly what we need, right? Someone to be able to, confide in, talk to, and just have real conversations with, right? Because in this age of the internet, it's almost difficult, right? So, yes, thank, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Right. So starting about, I want us to, touch on growing up online, right, and the digital age, basically. So we are raising a generation inside algorithms, constant stimulations, and, AI generated content, right? So how is that changing the way young people think, feel, and, relate to themselves?
Through my experience with working with young people, there is a sense of expectation that older generations, like I'm technically a millennial, right? So even my
Right.
generation, who's very close to the generation that is either just graduating high school or is in high school right now, it's something that we can't necessarily relate to. Because, like I said, we're talking about a generation that spent a good part of their formative years in front of a screen, in the middle of the pandemic, and plus recreationally with their smartphones, tablets, iPads, what have you. When it comes to the types of things that were taught during the pandemic, beyond just doing school online, what were students learning? Here is everything that you could really ever want or need, all in one place. Here's where school is going to be. Here's where your family and friends can be seen and interacted with, right? Here's where all the information you could ever want or need is going to be in this one place. Here's where your entertainment is going to be, it has provided so much, which can be an amazing thing. But when you are still developing as a person, it can be difficult to separate yourself from it, especially with the influence of social media, where you don't know what life is like before that. When I was in middle school, I remember how big of a deal it was to set up my first MySpace account. We are
Right.
light years, ahead of that now, we're talking about a fear of missing out that's unprecedented. It's like if it didn't happen on social media, then it didn't happen at all. That seems to be the expectation. But particularly, the level of stimulation is not just an option you can take, it's a social expectation. It's just like if you're not on Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok, there's almost like a question mark over your head. Like, what is
Right.
wrong with you? You're not in the culture in a way, So when it comes to how it affects young people today, just to bring it back, it's that sense of expectation to the point where if I'm not a virtual performer on this worldwide virtual stage, then who am I? You know, if
Right.
I'm not constantly being fed information and entertainment, it's like I'm missing out on something. Who am I without my device? Who am I without these expectations? We're talking about, we can talk about the pornography aspect and the social media aspect, but we're talking about an identity challenge. We're talking about an issue when it comes to a sense of self. So I know that's pretty heavy, but it's just what I've seen, and that's why I do what I do.
Hmm. Wow. All right, talking about, the whole identity and social media. I think it has taken a toll on our generation. I mean, the whole Gen Z, right? I mean, there's this thing they say build online. If you, let's say you're an entrepreneur, if you don't build online, people would not trust your brand. Even businesses aside, as a person, right? If you do not have some certain account, like you mentioned, Instagram, Snapchat, there's
Mhm.
this question mark in your head, like, who is this, right? So you're not informed, or they immediately start to look at you some kind of way, right? So, and then I can't help but wonder, how does that make people who are not able to, who are probably not active online, how does it make them feel basically? Because some people start to feel left out, right? There's even comparisons, right? You start to compare yourself with people you see online, right? So I don't know what this should actually make people feel basically.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the comparison game because, I
Mm.
mean, we remember, high school or middle school and the lunchroom, where it's like peer pressure and cliques and feeling like you wanted to be a part of something was always part of adolescence. In fact, on a
Mm.
neurological level, we're starting to become much more concrete in the way
Mm.
we see ourselves, in the way we see the world, in the way we just take in information. This is what this is, and this is what I feel about it. We're forming our own opinions based on what we've learned up until this point. And once we go off to college, we're about exploring those opinions and exploring those passions in a deeper level. When it comes to somebody in the, middle school or high school lunchroom today, there's still that peer pressure and influence, but when
Mm.
you have the world in your pocket, it's like you're comparing yourself with the other girls or boys in the cafeteria, but you're also comparing yourself with the girls and boys online. So it's like
Right.
the cafeteria just expanded to become as big as the world. It's a being in a perpetual state of keeping up with the Joneses, as we call it. It's comparing yourself with either something that is airbrushed, filtered, or in the most
Mm.
desperate of circumstances, not even real. We're talking
Real.
about being in the age of artificial intelligence, where it's becoming harder even for us to pick out what's real and what isn't, you know?
Mm.
So
Right.
those are some of the things that I see. And I think, again, what I try to communicate and teach and coach students up in is that sense of identity. So yes, let's say
Mm.
that they want to promote themselves in certain ways. Like I'm also a musician, so I'm active online when it comes to promoting my stuff and trying to network and
Mm.
make myself seen in that regard, right? So when it comes to who am I beyond my
Mm.
presence online? Who am I besides the expectation that society has on me? Who am I when I'm just me by
Mm.
myself? What I want to encourage is that overall sense of balance. I'm not suggesting
Right.
we go back to, horses and using candles instead of light bulbs, but
Right.
finding that sense of balance where we use a device like a tool, not just a toy, right?
Mm.
So those are just some of the things that we talk about in the program, but it all stems from that sense of, like I said, identity. When
Mm.
I'm not being fed all this constant stream of information, what do I believe?
One
What do
mind.
I
Right.
think about the world? What is important to me?
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
keep up with the times. And I'm not saying we should cut out social media or cut out devices, but let's not lose our sense of humanity in the process. So that's really the types
Mm.
of things we talk about in the Rebooted Teen program, which is the program that I built for young people that may have fallen on hard times when it comes to
Mm.
whether it's compulsive behaviors in the world of pornography, but honestly, just having your sense of self be challenged or sometimes forgotten to the point
Mm.
where if you can't put your screen down and it becomes not just, something you do a lot, maybe we're all guilty of doom scrolling every now and again, but to the
Yeah.
point where it becomes emotionally compulsive. So it's like if I want to feel better or give myself the feeling like I'm having fun, like I'll scroll on my phone or my iPad for a while. If I want to feel excited, I'll scroll. If I want to feel like I'm engaging in community, if I want to not feel so alone, I'll scroll. If I'm feeling, depressed, I'll scroll. If it becomes more of a medicine than just something to interact with, that
Mm,
might be time to pause and get curious about where our decisions come from. I think it's really
mm,
important for a young person to know that they always have a choice
mm,
and our decisions don't come from nowhere. We're emotional creatures. So getting
mm,
curious about what's going on internally to the point where we know how and why it's affecting us externally is a step
mm.
toward recovery. It's a step toward just a healthier mindset. And it's just a step toward, feeling more fulfilled in life as it is.
Hmm. Wow. All right, Chris. I would say I'm learning a whole lot actually. And your program, right? You said the rebooted teen, right? The rebooted teen program. Okay, so yes, before I ask my final question today, I want us to touch on pornography recovery and emotional healing, right? So your work addresses pornography addiction recovery, especially in teens, right? So why do you think this issue is still so difficult for people to, discuss honestly?
Well, I mean, even when we have to use the word obviously, it's like, of course, this
Right.
is awkward to talk about. But in a sense, I understand. It's
Mm,
not always going to be a conversation you're going to have with your family at the dinner table. Like, I get it, you
yeah.
know what I mean?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
the more we let a stigma like this persist, the more it's going to stick around.
Mm,
It is something that's real. Pornography is
mm,
something that's real. Sex is something that's real. And the more we kind of
mm,
sweep things under the rug, the more we will have our young people, in more ways than one, be left to
mm,
their own devices. Whether it
right.
is through social media or pornography, you know, I want to make an effort to encourage parents or guardians, right? In the age of influencers online, remember that you are your child's original influencer, you
Mm,
know, and
right.
you have more power and more presence than you perhaps might realize.
Mm,
So when it comes to engaging in these types of conversations, like, okay, I found something strange on, my child's device, or I think they might be watching porn, and I don't know how to talk about it. That's very,
mm,
very normal, very, very common. What I've also built is something called the Rebooted Teen Parents Program. So
mm,
if I could, plug this for a second,
mm,
there's a website called rebootedteen.com, and
mm,
where anybody who's listening to this, if you have a child or know of someone that has a child that might be struggling with an out of control behavior, what I've
mm,
done is I've built a free program, so no charge, it's my gift to you, for anybody that might be feeling that way. It's like, okay, I know my child is acting out and I don't know how to address
mm,
conversations about porn or sex or the internet because I don't know what's out there. I don't really know how
mm,
to start. Maybe I just feel uncomfortable about these topics in general. Again, it's okay to admit that. But what I've done is just give you a set of conversation starters, tools that you can use, things to keep in mind when you do engage with your child.
mm,
But ultimately, what I want to see is a generation that knows that if slash when they do stumble onto something like pornography, I mean, I can speak all day on the fact that
mm,
the age is getting younger and younger. on
Mm,
when a child is first exposed to porn. So it's not a
mm.
matter of if, it's a matter of when they do
When?
stumble on. I
Mm,
want a generation to know that A, it's normal,
mm,
B, there are people that they can trust. Because again, in the age of AI, in the age of fake news, quote unquote, it can be very difficult to know what's true and what isn't. Who can I
mm,
believe? Who can I trust? But when we
right.
choose openness, compassion, and not leading with a sense of shame, but leading with a sense of curiosity when having these types of conversations about sex,
Mm,
about the internet, about pornography, we're more likely to give a young person what they need. And that
mm,
is a space where they're accepted, a space where they're heard, a space where they're not judged because of the fact that they have questions, you know?
mm,
And that is just the first step. We go into much more detail about this in the Rebooted Teen and Rebooted Teen Parent programs,
mm,
but if there's any place to start, it's cultivating what I like to call a culture of curiosity, asking
mm,
questions as opposed to making accusations. You know,
right.
where is this behavior coming from? What are you trying to feel when you engage with this? And how can I help? As a
Mm,
parent, as a mom, as a dad, as a father figure, a mother figure, as a guardian, if you're listening to this and you have a child or know of a child that, like I said, might be struggling, there is hope. There are resources that can help. There is community that, you can trade notes with and keep yourself accountable. And if there's anything that I can't do, I can't tell someone how to be a parent. That's not my role. That's not my job. I can't tell you what's important to you. But just like every athlete that you've ever met, one of the things that makes them great is that they all have coaches. I
mm,
can't teach LeBron James how to play basketball. But one thing that I can do is be a coach so that way he can play his game better. That's what I want for anybody who might be listening to this. If you're a young person and you're listening to this, and yeah, I feel like if you have a feeling like, man, I might be struggling with this. Like, I've
mm,
tried to stop on my own, whether it's watching porn or just trying to stop scrolling on my phone so much. I've tried to stop on my own, but I can't. And if that concerns you, if you feel you need help, then I'm somebody through my lived experience and through my professional certifications, I'm someone that can help and I'm willing to help, you know? So
right.
for anyone that might be feeling alone, that might be feeling like you don't have the tools or the words to share if you want to help somebody, let me be your coach and let's
Mm,
work. You can find a sample of that, like I said, at rebootedteen.com or rebootedteen on Instagram. Pornography doesn't have to run your life. Social media addiction doesn't have to run your life. We can use our devices as tools without losing our sense of humanity. And that's what I'm here to help you do. So if any of this resonates, uh, that's who I am, that's what I do, and that's where you can find me.
mm. All right. Wow. Okay. So yes, thank you, Chris, for such an amazing conversation, actually. And like you said, it's important to create a space where teens feel safe, right? Especially when it comes to topics like this, right? So they could just openly be vulnerable, unlike the other way around. So yes, thank you. And I know you've mentioned your website, but I want you to say it again, right? Where can listeners get to learn more about you and also connect with you?
Sure. You can find, again, the Rebooted Teen Parent Program over at
Mm,
rebootedteen.com. And if you're getting a lot of value out of that, and if you are applying it and it seems to be working, and if you want to take your child's success to the next level, if you want to
mm,
water the plant of their well-being and their confidence and the trust that they're making decisions not based on impulse but out of their values, then that's what the Rebooted Teen program is for. So if you feel you need to take that extra step and if you're curious to learn more, you can check me out again at rebootedteen.com.
Right, exactly. Wow. Yes, so thank you, Chris, for such an amazing conversation. And before we go, I want us to do this segment. I call it the rapid fire segment, right? You either answer with a word or a phrase starting now. So
I'm ready.
what is one thing that schools should teach more?
Life skills, like
Hmm.
how to pay your taxes, how to cook, how
Mhm.
to resolve conflicts, like things that we will need to know how to do in everyday life.
Oh, right. Okay. And what is one thing social media trains people to do poorly?
Can you ask that one more time?
Right. What is one thing social media trains people to do poorly?
One thing that social media trains people to do poorly:
Hmm.
become a consumer instead of a creator.
Hmm.
You know, when we're constantly training ourselves to just scroll, 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 it's called social media for a reason. One of the good
Right.
things about social media is that it's an opportunity to interact with people from all around the world. It's an opportunity to express yourself. It's an opportunity to, yes, learn. But when we're used to and have gotten to a place where we feel we need that constant hit of dopamine and that constant boost of validation, it can be hard to put it down. But social media, especially when it becomes excessive and compulsive, and if we have difficulty putting our devices down, it can train us to again become just a consumer. Like, I need more, instead of being a contributor, instead of being a creator. We tend to rely on social media to tell us what to believe and how to think and how to operate, instead of, again, trusting our own gut. So one thing it can train us to do that can be unhealthy is, again, training ourselves to become a consumer, like give me more, instead of a contributor, instead of a creator. Like, let me give back, let me contribute, let me share. So that's one thing to watch out for.
All right. Wow. Thank you, Chris. And yes, I would say I've learned a lot, and I believe my listeners would do the same. They will learn so much from this, especially when they visit your website. Like you said, the rebooted things. Okay. So, yes, to my listener, thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone who you think might need this, and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new